The freezing fog settled across the Schnee-Eifel Ridge on that early morning of December 16, 1944, blanketing the positions where American soldiers of the 106th Infantry Division waited in the cold darkness. Just across the way, German troops from the 18th Volksgrenadier Division were making their final preparations for what would become the opening moves of what history remembers as the Battle of the Bulge. These Wehrmacht soldiers carried rifles that their fathers might have recognized from the previous World War, the Karabiner 98 Kurz, a bolt-action weapon descended from a design that had been refined over decades of use. The rifle had proven itself reliable from the campaigns in Poland through the brutal fighting outside Moscow, and German commanders had complete faith in its capabilities. What these soldiers couldn't have fully grasped as they prepared for the assault was how thoroughly the mathematics governing infantry combat had shifted beneath their feet. The Americans waiting for them possessed a fundamental advantage that would manifest itself in the most brutal arithmetic of battle. The simple fact that while a German rifleman could manage perhaps 15 carefully aimed shots in a minute, an American soldier with his M1 Garand could send downrange somewhere between 20 and 24 aimed rounds in that same span of time. The German military establishment had excellent reasons for their confidence in the Karabiner 98 Kurz. The Mauser action upon which it was based had been continuously refined since 1898, representing what many considered the absolute peak of bolt-action rifle engineering. German training doctrine, as laid out in manuals like Der Dienstunterricht im Heer, placed enormous emphasis on precision marksmanship rather than throwing lead down range indiscriminately. The philosophy ran deep through German military culture, this idea that a single well-placed shot held more value than 20 rounds scattered across a hillside. This approach had carried German forces to stunning victories across the European continent. The same basic rifle design had served in colonial conflicts throughout the Great War, and during the early campaigns of this second global conflict that had seen German forces sweep across Poland and France with shocking speed. German infantry tactics centered around the MG 42 machine gun providing suppressive fire, with individual riflemen contributing precise, deliberate shots. The system had conquered Poland in mere weeks and brought France to its knees in 6 weeks of fighting. What researchers from the United States Army would discover when examining German training methods after the war was that German doctrine emphasized engaging targets at ranges between 400 and 800 meters, despite the reality that most actual combat encounters happened at distances under 300 meters. This disconnect between doctrinal assumptions and battlefield reality would exact a terrible price when German forces faced American troops carrying weapons specifically optimized for the ranges where fights actually occurred. The first major encounter between the Wehrmacht and large American forces equipped with M1 Garands came at Kasserine Pass in February of 1943. Though the Germans won that battle tactically, reports that filtered back to German high command contained troubling observations that were largely dismissed at the time. According to records preserved by the United States Army's historical section, German units reported encountering volumes of rifle fire from American positions that exceeded their expectations. Reconnaissance elements from the 10th Panzer Division, engaging components of the 2nd United States Corps, documented something unexpected in their after-action reports: American infantry maintaining continuous fire while executing fighting withdrawals, a tactical maneuver that was virtually impossible to perform effectively with bolt-action rifles. When American intelligence analysts later examined German casualty reports from Kasserine, they found disproportionate losses occurring during pursuit phases, when American forces, though retreating, kept up steady defensive fire that took its toll on pursuing German troops. The German victory at Kasserine, however, meant these warning signs went largely unheeded. The Americans were inexperienced and poorly commanded, the thinking went, so surely their equipment couldn't compensate for German tactical and leadership superiority. The Italian campaign that stretched from 1943 into 1944 gave German forces extended exposure to American firepower in terrain that should have favored defenders armed with bolt-action rifles engaging targets at longer ranges. The mountainous landscape of Italy ought to have given advantages to defenders with bolt-action rifles. At San Pietro in December of 1943, the 29th Panzer Grenadier Division encountered sustained American rifle fire that violated German expectations about how infantry combat should unfold. Combat interviews that United States Army investigators conducted immediately after that battle documented American riflemen maintaining suppressive fire while simultaneously maneuvering, with each individual soldier functioning as his own base of fire, rather than being dependent on squad automatic weapons the way German doctrine assumed. German defensive positions throughout the winter line, particularly in the area around Monte Cassino, reported increasing difficulty in countering American patrol tactics. Reports from United States Army units indicate that American patrols, armed primarily with M1 Garands, could generate sufficient firepower to suppress German positions while simultaneously maneuvering against them, forcing defenders to keep their heads down. The fighting along the Gothic Line in 1944 demonstrated the cumulative effect of the firepower disparity. German defensive doctrine called for defenders to pop up from cover in the pauses between enemy shots to return fire. Against semi-automatic weapons, that pause simply didn't exist. Wehrmacht units reported back to their higher headquarters that American infantry possessed fire superiority at all engagement ranges under 500 meters. The Normandy invasion brought the firepower gap into the sharpest possible focus. The 352nd Infantry Division, defending Omaha Beach, consisted of experienced troops occupying prepared positions with pre-registered fields of fire covering the approaches. Despite these considerable advantages, they found themselves overwhelmed by the sheer volume of aimed rifle fire coming from advancing American units. Historical records from D-Day document soldiers of the 1st and 29th United States Infantry Divisions, despite taking horrific casualties on Omaha Beach, maintaining suppressive fire while advancing up those bluffs. German strong points that had been designed to withstand artillery bombardment found themselves gradually suppressed by the cumulative effect of thousands upon thousands of 30-06 rounds fired from M1 Garands. The hedgerow fighting that characterized the Normandy campaign created engagement ranges of 50 meters or less in many cases. At these distances, rate of fire proved far more valuable than the long-range accuracy that German doctrine had emphasized. American tactical doctrine, developed at Fort Benning and refined through hard combat experience, emphasized what they called marching fire, advancing while maintaining continuous fire from every rifleman in the formation. Analysis conducted by United States Army historians after the war found that American rifle companies in Normandy expended an average of 5,000 rounds per day during active combat operations, compared to German rifle companies expending around 1,500 rounds. This disparity didn't reflect waste, but rather different tactical capabilities. Americans could maintain suppressive fire because every single soldier carried a semi-automatic rifle. The M1 Garand, designed by Canadian-American John Garand and adopted by the United States Army in 1936, fundamentally altered what was possible in infantry tactics. Firing the same .30-06 cartridge as its predecessor, the Springfield rifle, it featured an 8-round N-block clip and a gas-operated semi-automatic action. When you compare the technical specifications, the M1 Garand could deliver 16 to 24 aimed rounds per minute compared to the Kar 98 Kurtz's 15 rounds per minute. The magazine capacity told its own story, 8 rounds versus 5. Effective range was comparable for both weapons at around 440 yards for average soldiers. The M1 Garand weighed 9.5 pounds compared to the Kar 98 Kurtz's 8.8 pounds. German technical intelligence examined captured M1 Garands extensively, and a report from the Kummersdorf Proving Ground in 1943 acknowledged the rifle's mechanical reliability despite its complexity. However, German analysts focused on the weapon's individual characteristics rather than grasping its impact on how entire squads could operate tactically. The transformation went beyond just individual weapons. American squad tactics distributed firepower across all squad members. Each United States rifle squad could generate 160 to 200 rounds per minute of aimed fire, compared to a German squad's 40 to 70 rounds per minute from rifles alone. While German squads relied on the MG-42 for suppression, American squads achieved similar effects through the combined rifle fire of all squad members. The Battle of the Bulge in December of 1944 demonstrated the complete superiority of semi-automatic rifles in modern combat conditions. The Wehrmacht launched what would be its last major offensive with veteran troops and the crucial advantage of surprise, yet found their tactical doctrine ineffective against American firepower. Kampfgruppe Piper, the spearhead of the 6th Panzer Army, encountered elements of the 99th United States Infantry Division near Lanzerath on December 16th. United States Army records document that despite being outnumbered, American infantry platoons managed to delay the German advance through sustained rifle fire that prevented German infantry from effectively supporting their armour. Near Bastogne, the 101st Airborne Division, surrounded and outnumbered, held their perimeter partly due to the firepower advantage provided by the M1 Garand. Combat reports indicate that German attacks repeatedly failed when attackers couldn't close with American positions due to the continuous suppressive fire that defenders could maintain almost indefinitely. The industrial story behind the M1 Garand proved every bit as decisive as its battlefield performance. Springfield Armory and Winchester Repeating Arms Company produced 4,040,800 M1 Garands during the course of World War II. Peak production at Springfield Armory reached 3,936 rifles per day in January of 1944. When you compare production numbers, the contrast becomes stark. 4,040,800 M1 Garands were produced in total, compared to 462,000 German semi-automatic rifles of the G43 and K43 variants combined. That works out to a ratio of 8.7 to 1 in favour of the United States. This production disparity meant that while fewer than 5% of German infantry carried semi-automatic rifles, 100% of American infantry received M1 Garands. The United States achieved mass production through innovative manufacturing techniques, specialized machinery, assembly line methods, and standardized parts with interchangeable components. Springfield Armory transformed itself from a traditional government arsenal into a modern production facility. Using techniques borrowed directly from automotive manufacturing, workers who had never built firearms in their lives could perform single, repetitive operations that collectively produced thousands of rifles every single day. The Wehrmacht attempted to adapt to the firepower disparity through several different measures. The Gewehr 43, a German semi-automatic rifle, entered production in 1943, but never achieved sufficient numbers to equip more than specialist units scattered throughout the armed forces. The revolutionary STG-44 assault rifle, entering service in late 1943, pointed toward what future infantry weapons would become, but with only 425,000 produced, it simply couldn't change the fundamental arithmetic of the battlefield. German tactical manuals were revised in 1944 to acknowledge American firepower superiority explicitly. New defensive tactics emphasized deeper entrenchments, increased reliance on mortars and artillery, and avoiding direct firefights with American infantry whenever possible. However, these adaptations represented tactical retreats rather than actual solutions to the problem. United States Army intelligence observed that German units on the Western Front increasingly avoided offensive operations that required infantry assault, recognizing their disadvantage in direct fire engagements. This defensive mindset, forced upon them by material inferiority, contributed to the Wehrmacht's inability to regain the initiative after the Normandy breakout. The M1 Garand's superiority affected combined arms tactics beyond simple infantry engagements. German doctrine required close cooperation between infantry and armour, with infantry advancing alongside tanks to protect them against anti-tank teams. American rifle fire made this coordination extremely difficult to execute effectively. During Operation Cobra, the American breakout from Normandy in July of 1944, German panzer units reported that their accompanying infantry couldn't maintain contact with advancing armour due to the intensity of American small arms fire. Tanks advancing without infantry support proved vulnerable to bazooka teams and artillery observers who could work without interference. The M1 Garand also enhanced American defensive capabilities significantly. During the German counter-offensive at Mortain in August of 1944, the 30th United States Infantry Division held critical positions partly due to their ability to generate sustained defensive fire. Each American foxhole could produce continuous aimed fire, making German infantry assault prohibitively costly in terms of casualties. American forces had refined semi-automatic rifle tactics in the Pacific Theater before applying those same lessons in Europe. Against Japanese forces similarly armed with bolt-action Arisaka rifles, United States Marines and Army units developed techniques that maximized their firepower advantage. The concept of what they called vertical envelopment, suppressing enemy positions with rifle fire while maneuvering to attack from unexpected angles, proved equally effective when employed against German forces. The tactical flexibility provided by distributed firepower allowed American units to maintain constant pressure while simultaneously maneuvering, a capability that German units armed with bolt-action rifles simply couldn't match under most circumstances. The M1 Garand's higher rate of fire demanded a completely revolutionary approach to ammunition supply logistics. American divisions operating in Europe required approximately 10 times the small arms ammunition of equivalent German units. The United States Army met this demand through an unprecedented logistics effort that would have been unthinkable in earlier wars. Lake City Army Ammunition Plant alone produced over 3 million rounds of .30-06 ammunition daily by 1944. The Red Ball Express, the famous truck convoy system, prioritized ammunition delivery to frontline units above almost everything else. American soldiers typically carried 80 to 100 rounds compared to German soldiers carrying 60 rounds, with constant resupply available through the logistics chain. This ammunition abundance enabled American tactical doctrine in ways that would have been impossible otherwise. United States forces employed what they called reconnaissance by fire, shooting at suspected enemy positions to provoke a response and reveal enemy locations. German forces, trained to conserve ammunition carefully, found this seemingly wasteful but highly effective tactic incomprehensible and difficult to counter effectively. The United States Army developed training programs specifically designed around the M1 Garand's capabilities and how to maximize them. At Fort Benning, the infantry school created courses emphasizing rapid target engagement over precision marksmanship of the old-school variety. Soldiers learned what they called instinctive shooting, quickly acquiring and engaging targets without achieving a perfect sight picture first. The Trainfire program, introduced in 1943, used pop-up targets at varying ranges to simulate actual combat conditions. Soldiers fired hundreds and hundreds of rounds in training, building muscle memory for rapid engagement that would serve them in combat. This contrasted sharply with German training approaches that emphasized deliberate, precise shooting with carefully limited ammunition expenditure during training exercises. American tactical doctrine evolved continuously to maximize the advantages provided by semi-automatic rifles. Fire teams could execute fire and movement with far greater flexibility, since any soldier could provide suppressive fire while others maneuvered. The traditional distinction between fire elements and maneuver elements blurred considerably when every single soldier could maintain rapid fire independently. During the assault on the Siegfried Line in the fall of 1944, American forces demonstrated how semi-automatic rifles could overcome even prepared defensive fortifications. German fortifications, carefully designed to channel attackers into predetermined kill zones for machine guns, proved vulnerable to the cumulative effect of sustained rifle fire from multiple directions. The 1st United States Army reported that M1 Garand fire could suppress German bunker apertures effectively, allowing combat engineers to approach with demolition charges. The volume of fire from a single American platoon could neutralize multiple German positions simultaneously, preventing those positions from providing mutual support to each other. The Battle for Aachen in October of 1944 showcased urban combat conditions where the M1 Garand's advantages were magnified even further. At close quarters inside buildings, the ability to fire 8 rounds rapidly without working a bolt proved absolutely decisive in room-to-room fighting. American soldiers could clear rooms and entire buildings more effectively than their German counterparts, who had to work bolt actions between shots. The M1 Garand's gas-operated system proved more reliable in adverse conditions than engineers had initially expected during the design phase. During the harsh winter of 1944–45, the rifle continued functioning in extreme cold that caused significant problems for other weapons systems. The design's enclosed operating rod and gas system resisted mud and debris considerably better than the exposed bolt action of the Kar-98 Kurz. While both rifles required regular maintenance, the M1's semi-automatic action meant soldiers spent less time with their weapons exposed to enemy fire during reloading procedures. The N-block clip system, initially criticized for its distinctive ping sound when ejecting the empty clip, actually proved advantageous in combat conditions. Soldiers could reload simply by feel in darkness or poor visibility conditions, just pressing the clip into the receiver until it clicked into place. German soldiers had to individually load rounds into their rifles' internal magazines one at a time, a slower process requiring greater manual dexterity and fine motor control that could be difficult under stress or in cold conditions. The M1 Garand represented American industrial philosophy applied directly to warfare, the concept of mass production of good enough quality rather than handcrafted precision in each individual unit. Each rifle cost approximately $85 to produce in 1945, comparable to what the Kar-98 Kurz cost to manufacture. But American factories could produce them roughly 3 times faster than German factories working under increasingly difficult conditions. This efficiency extended throughout the entire supply chain supporting the weapon. Standardized ammunition, truly interchangeable parts, and simplified maintenance procedures reduced the overall logistics burden significantly. A damaged M1 could often be repaired in the field by simply swapping components from other rifles, while Kar-98 Kurz repairs might require skilled armorer work that wasn't available at the front lines. The strategic impact of this industrial capacity proved profound and far-reaching. America could equip its rapidly expanding army with modern weapons, while simultaneously maintaining production of tanks, aircraft, and ships on an enormous scale. Germany, facing increasing resource constraints and systematic bombing of industrial facilities, couldn't match this production capacity even with the theoretically simpler bolt-action rifles they were producing. After Germany's surrender in May of 1945, United States Army operational research teams conducted extensive studies examining infantry combat effectiveness across the European theatre. Their analysis, based on detailed combat records and extensive prisoner interrogations, confirmed the M1 Garand's decisive impact on battlefield outcomes. Statistical analysis revealed some striking findings. American rifle companies generated 340% more small arms fire than German equivalents. Average engagement duration increased from 5 to 10 minutes in earlier conflicts to 30 to 45 minutes in World War II due to sustained fire capability on both sides. American infantry could advance under their own fire support without necessarily waiting for machine guns or mortars to be brought into position. General George Patton called the M1 Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised, a quote that has been repeated countless times since. This assessment reflected not just the rifle's individual qualities as a piece of engineering, but rather its complete transformation of what infantry combat looked like and what was tactically possible. The weapon enabled American tactical doctrine that emphasized firepower, mobility, and aggressive action in ways that simply hadn't been possible with bolt-action rifles. German military professionals writing their memoirs and analyses after the war acknowledged their failure to appreciate the semi-automatic rifle's true importance until it was far too late to respond effectively. General Franz Halder, who had served as chief of the German General Staff earlier in the war, noted in his post-war writings that the Wehrmacht had badly underestimated how tactical superiority in basic infantry weapons could overcome what they had considered decisive advantages in training quality and combat experience. When West Germany rearmed itself in 1955, forming the new Bundeswehr, that organization immediately adopted automatic weapons as standard infantry arms. Initially, they selected the FNFAL, which they designated as the G1, and later transitioned to the G3 rifle. No German military force would ever again field bolt-action rifles as primary infantry weapons, a complete reversal of the doctrine that had guided German military thinking for generations. This decision reflected hard lessons learned from World War II experience. Bundeswehr planning documents from that period explicitly emphasized that future German forces must never again face technological disadvantage in basic infantry weapons. The trauma of facing superior American firepower shaped German military procurement priorities for decades to come. The M1 Garand's success on the battlefields of Europe influenced military thinking across the entire world. Every major military power adopted semi-automatic or fully automatic rifles in the immediate post-war period, completely abandoning bolt-action rifles for frontline infantry use. The Soviet Union's SKS carbine and later the legendary AK-47, Britain's EM2 rifle, and France's MAS-49 all reflected lessons learned from observing the American demonstration of semi-automatic superiority during World War II. The Korean War, beginning in 1950, proved these lessons absolutely correct. American forces armed with M1 Garands initially held significant advantages over North Korean and Chinese forces equipped with bolt-action rifles left over from earlier conflicts, though this gap closed progressively as Communist forces received more modern Soviet semi-automatic and automatic weapons through their supply lines. The tactical innovations developed specifically to exploit the M1 Garand's capabilities influenced modern infantry doctrine in ways that persist to this day. The concept of distributed firepower, treating every soldier as a significant fire contributor rather than primarily as ammunition carriers for machine guns, became absolutely standard in Western militaries and eventually spread worldwide. Modern squad tactics, emphasizing flexibility and rapid decision-making at the lowest possible levels, evolved directly from capabilities first provided by semi-automatic rifles in the hands of every infantryman. The ability of individual soldiers to provide effective suppressive fire while simultaneously maneuvering remains absolutely fundamental to contemporary infantry operations across all modern militaries. The M1 Garand demonstrated conclusively that industrial capacity could provide decisive tactical advantage on the battlefield. America's ability to mass-produce complex weapons while maintaining acceptable quality standards proved that 20th-century warfare required industrial might every bit as much as military skill and tactical acumen. This lesson extended far beyond just small arms production. The same production philosophy that created millions of M1 Garands also produced tens of thousands of tanks, aircraft, and ships that overwhelmed Axis forces through sheer material superiority. The integration of mass production techniques with military requirements revolutionized warfare logistics in ways that shaped military planning for the remainder of the century. The M1 Garand's impact went well beyond pure firepower statistics and technical specifications. It provided American soldiers, many of them civilian conscripts with minimal military experience before being drafted, with a tangible technological advantage over professional German soldiers who had years of training and combat experience. This technological edge boosted American morale and confidence significantly, contributing to the aggressive tactical execution that characterized American operations. Conversely, German forces experienced progressive demoralization when repeatedly facing superior enemy weapons that they simply couldn't match. Post-war studies examining German military effectiveness indicated that knowledge of American firepower superiority measurably affected German recruitment, training quality, and combat effectiveness during the war's final years as the realization spread through the ranks. The M1 Garand's superiority over the Karabiner 98 Kurz represented far more than a simple technological advantage in one category of weapons. It marked the definitive end of an entire era in infantry combat that had lasted for generations. The age of the bolt-action rifle, which had dominated battlefields across the world since the 1880s and 1890s, ended decisively in the hedgerows of Normandy, in the frozen forests of the Ardennes during the Battle of the Bulge, and in the rubbled cities of the Third Reich during the final campaigns. German forces had entered World War II supremely confident in their tactical doctrine, their training superiority, and their combat experience gained through years of warfare. They discovered through bitter experience that American mass production capabilities and semi-automatic technology had rendered their entire approach to infantry combat fundamentally obsolete, regardless of how skilled and experienced their soldiers might be. The transformation was complete, total, and absolutely irreversible once it occurred. No major military anywhere in the world would ever again field bolt-action rifles as primary infantry weapons after seeing what had happened in World War II. The lessons learned during the period from 1943 to 1945, demonstrating that firepower, production capacity, and technological innovation could overcome traditional military virtues like training quality and tactical experience, shaped military thinking and procurement decisions for the remainder of the 20th century and beyond into our current era. The M1 Garand accomplished far more than simply helping the Allies win World War II, as significant as that contribution was. It revolutionized the fundamental nature of infantry combat in ways that would never be reversed. Every single time a German soldier paused to work his rifle's bolt action while American bullets cracked through the air overhead, the future of warfare was being written in real time. That future clearly belonged to nations that could successfully harness industrial might to provide their soldiers with decisive technological advantages on the battlefield. The Wehrmacht had confidently expected to fight a war where training quality, tactical doctrine, and combat experience would prove decisive factors determining victory or defeat. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy whose industrial democracy had managed to provide every single soldier with a semi-automatic rifle and effectively unlimited ammunition to feed through it. In that fundamental mismatch lay not just tactical defeat in individual engagements, but the end of an entire conception of how warfare should be conducted. The M1 Garand had made the bolt-action rifle, and all the military doctrine that had been built around bolt-action rifle capabilities, completely obsolete for modern warfare. The German army had never expected this particular challenge. They never fully adapted to it despite various attempts, and ultimately they never recovered from the disadvantage it created. The 8-round N-block clip had defeated the 5-round stripper clip, and along with it, an entire philosophy of war that had guided military thinking for generations. The age of industrial warfare had definitively arrived on battlefields across Europe and the Pacific, delivered one semi-automatic shot at a time by American infantrymen who often had been civilians just months earlier. This historical analysis draws upon documented military records, extensive post-war studies, and technical evaluations conducted by the United States Army and numerous military historians over the decades since these events occurred. While it necessarily presents interpretation of tactical impacts and their significance, all battle dates mentioned, unit designations cited, production figures quoted, and technical specifications provided are drawn from verified historical sources that can be checked against archives. The analysis represents historical interpretation based on the available evidence preserved in military records, rather than making definitive claims about individual soldier experiences, which varied enormously depending on specific circumstances, units involved, and countless other factors that affected each engagement differently.